Welcome to the DTB Podcast, presented by Bless Your Heart Nonprofit Corporation. I'm Brennan Mathern, and I'll be your host as we speak to some of the most interesting people on Bayou Lafourche. Will Smith, Bryan Cranston, Russell Crowe, Kelsey Grammer. These are just a handful of the stars of movie and TV that our guest in this episode has had an opportunity to work alongside. Hick Cheramie is an oilfield worker who found his way into acting and was even featured in a Super Bowl commercial this past year. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. In this episode, we'll hear about his journey from the bayou to the bright lights, and we'll also talk about some struggles along the way. Hick Cheramie, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm humbled and honored to be here amongst you two.
Well, I know that you've been in front of some much bigger microphones than this over the course of your career, and maybe some brighter lights. But since you're from down the bayou, I know how you're going to be able to handle this question. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, who's your mom and dad, where you grew up, and where you're at now.
Okay, I'm from Galliano. Started out as a wildcat, lion, and a poisson. Ended with a poisson. Barely made it to end it as a poisson. I wasn't too great in school. My father was Hick Cheramie III, and my mother was Rebecca LaFar. I now reside in Thibodaux because it's closer to my oil field work, and it's a good hub for me to get to Baton Rouge, New Orleans, or wherever I got to film.
You mentioned you're in the oil field business. You've been in there for about a decade now. Tell us a little bit about that job. And again, a lot of people, especially if they follow you on social media, they know you're an actor, but they may not realize that you have a regular 9-to-5 job as well.
Yes, I've been fortunate enough to work for the Danos family since 2014. I'm coming up on 10 years in February. And, the Danoses have been a huge part of my success. Number one in my success with sobriety, because initially I went to the Danoses when I had a drinking problem. I still have a drinking problem. I just choose not to drink. And, when acting came about, they've been very supportive of my acting. Unfortunately, a working actor, you're looking at probably, I'd say 11% of actors are actually working actors, and it's including A-list actors, like you said earlier, Will Smith and et cetera. So that an actor, I'd say at my caliber, I would never make it. I am SAG eligible. I could join the union, but in order to have insurance from the union, I would have to make a certain amount of money a year, and that's in the tens of thousands of dollars acting, which I do well with acting. So I have 2 children. Anybody that follows me on social media sees I have a son and a daughter. I like to keep them insured. So I enjoy my oil field job benefits. I enjoy the family I work for. And initially I enjoy my job. The Danos is an amazing family. And I really don't see myself working for anyone else, but them in the future, unless I become part of the 11% of actors that don't have to have a side gig. But most actors, the other, percentage has side gigs or they teach acting. You have a lot of big actors here in New Orleans who also teach acting to make up for supplemental income outside of the film industry. So, that's why I have an oil field job. The oil field job came first, so I truly believe without the Danoses and the oil field job, I wouldn't have reached the status I am as an actor.
Before we jump into that aspect of things, let's go back. You mentioned your children. Talk about them, because, when I see you share about them, you're following you on social media, I could tell how much love and how proud you are as a father. So talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, my kids are wonderful. And, thank God my kids are forgiving, because they seen me in the depths of alcoholism, and then they seen me recover. They've both successful in their own way. My daughter has exceeded expectations as an athlete. My son has exceeded expectations as far as what he does and what he designs. He's working on a skate clothing line, and he's only 16 years old. But my kids are everything to me. Cameron's in the room right now. She knows, like, I always say this: I don't work for my first name. I work for my last name, and it's for them, and it's always going to be for them. It's to build whatever I can for them. And they've taught so much to me, and I've taught so much to them, and we continue to teach each other, and it's one of the things I always tell them. Our character is everything, because before sobriety, I had very poor character. My character was a very dishonest, selfish person, and I harp on what character is, and because in the beginning of my sobriety with my children, my words meant nothing. My walk was everything, and I think they caught on to that. I think they caught on to that your walk is everything. Our walk, the way it is, it's what our character is. So I have a great relationship with them. We're very close. I have a really emotional bond with my children. Their mom's the tough one. Their mom is the tough one, and I'm the one who I guess sits down and has the intimate conversations with them about life and heart and spirituality and whatnot. But I'm super proud of them, and I'm a lucky man to have two children like that.
We've covered a lot of topics on the podcast, but one thing we haven't touched on is alcoholism. And before we get to where you are now, we have to talk about where you came from. I know it's something that you've been outspoken about your sobriety and your struggles early in your life. So if you don't mind, if you could take us back in time and take us on that journey from where you got started and where you saw those problems starting to kind of show themselves and where that took you in life.
Yeah, I grew up in an environment of drug abuse and alcoholism. So I knew it from an early age. And, what's crazy about this disease is that even growing up knowing what I knew about it and the destruction that I seen it cause, I still chose it, right? Because I remember on previous podcast, and I think it was Hick Cheramie who said it best, was that it all stems from some kind of trauma, and it all stems from some kind of trauma or event that happened in one's life, and they just don't know how to cope with it. So I started at I don't like to tell war stories, because I did this I was a drug addict for a long time, and I was an alcoholic for a long time, and I did this for 24-something years. But it basically started, with recreational drugs. And then I began to realize that I can use those things to cope with, life. I can deal with life on life's terms, right? And I've abused pharmaceuticals and hard narcotics and street narcotics for many, many, many years. And I ended up quitting cold turkey, which was a bad idea. There was no foundation, there was no program, there was no anything. And coming off of those narcotics, I picked up alcohol. Alcohol had never been a major problem for me, but now I was using alcohol to deal with the effects that I was lacking from the narcotics, right? So alcohol became an everyday thing in my life, to where it was something that I needed, and I needed it every day. And I became very chemically dependent on it. And it was all due to a lot of just unresolved problems. I was looking for a chemical solution, right, for a spiritual problem, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Right? That was my solution. The problem was here. It was spiritual, And there came a day, 5 years deep into heavy alcoholism, I had run-ins with the law. I remember getting arrested once and waking up in jail, and I to this day I still don't know why I got arrested. Like, I remember just going pay what I had to pay, and I still don't know why I got arrested. I still don't. I ended up having an idea but I don't know. I still don't know why. Like why I went do what I do. So it led me. Drugs and alcohol led me to some really dark places. It led me to some dangerous situations where I could have injured myself or others. And one day, 5 years into my alcoholism, there was a time in my life where I was a homeless heroin addict, right? And you would think that would be lonely for a human being. But I remember at the end of my professional drinking career, as I call it, it was a Monday morning, and I was sitting down in a garage, called into work sick, and I was drinking vodka. And at that moment in my life, I had never felt so alone. At the time, I had a roof over my head. I had a job. I thought I had good relationships. Little did I know that they weren't the greatest relationships that I had. Because when we drink, we lie to ourselves and we lie to others. And that morning, desperation had become my greatest gift. And that's the only way I can put it. And I remember that morning. It was like 2 weeks before Christmas. My kids were coming. I had all the Christmas presents there for the children. And I remember just breaking down and crying and feeling so hopeless and broken. And I'd never felt so hopeless and broken before in my life, no matter how down I thought I was before. And I remember sitting on the couch crying and looking up and talking to God, right? And it's kind of funny as an addict or an alcoholic because we like to bargain a lot, right? We like to bargain. We like to, if you get me out of this, I'm going to do this, or if you get me out of this, I'm gonna do that.
I think that's everybody here.
Yeah.
Just addicts.
And I can honestly say there's been no bargaining since I got sober in 2014, and I could talk about my whole relationship with that I have with God now. But I remember in that moment me completely surrendering, and it was a surrender that I had never surrendered before because I basically said do what you will with me. My way obviously does not work. And even in that moment of that spiritual experience, right? I don't think it was an awakening at that point, but I was having some kind of spiritual experience in that moment. I was like, I need help. And I was like, no. I was like, I'm going to wait till after Christmas. So the bargaining, it's like it kicked right back in. That's the deceiving nature of addiction. It will make you lie to yourself so easily, and I still can't explain this to this day. And I've told this story a million times, and I speak about it a lot with sobriety interviews and stuff. And God spoke to me, and He said, at that point in my life, my health was really bad. My liver was not in good shape.
Sure.
I had chronic pancreatitis. I've been hospitalized multiple times. There was a lot going on with me, and God spoke to me. He said, you will not be here next Christmas. And I remember picking up the phone and saying the three most important words I ever said in my life was, I need help, which I had never truly from the heart meant that I needed. And from there on, it's like, God started working through people. I ended up in a treatment center. I ended up doing what I was supposed to do. I ended up cleaning this dirty laundry that I had been carrying for years out of my soul and putting it down. And I took accountability, and I had quit blaming others, and I seen where I had a part to play in. Probably 90% of the things that I blamed other people for, I had a part to play in it. It was me not being accountable for. I had a part to play in it. And then sobriety came, and I had to learn to walk and talk and feel and, do these things all over again in a new life, in a new way. I had to learn how to build a relationship. We spoke about with kids earlier. I remember my daughter at one time, we were driving, and she starts talking about my grandfather, her grandfather, just my father, and family members being alcoholics and drug addicts. And she's 9 years old, and I'm maybe 9 months sober, and we're just driving, and she says, so-and-so was this, and so-and-so was that, an alcoholic, and you're an alcoholic and drug addict. She's like, but you don't have to be an alcoholic. But she said, no, she said that. You're an alcoholic and drug addict, but you don't do drugs and alcohol anymore. And I said, yes. And she says, well, that means I don't have to. And I realized, I said, man, it chokes me up every time. I realized that I broke this cycle, this ancestral trauma, right, that had been just passed down from generation to generation to generation. And I think the hardest thing that after we had that conversation, she asked me, she said, I'm so glad you'll never drink again. And I had to tell her that I can never promise her that. Because this thing is a day-by-day thing. Like, this is like a muscle. Recovery is like, it's like this rent, and it's due every day, and you got to put in the work every day. And like every day at like night when I go to bed, I got to take a moral inventory of myself. What can I do better than I did yesterday? And how could I be a better person? And maybe the way I talked to this person wasn't the right way. And you have to just like really be accountable, and you have to like really take a moral inventory of yourself, and like, where can you be better? And I have to have these conversations with God, and He never tells me yes. He's like, no, not yet, or I have something better for you, and it's like I have to have this constant contact with Him like every day. And I remember, and that's all I touch on this, the sobriety. I know I went a little off with it, but I remember the last relationship I was in. I was sober, and this person used to like to drink, and I remember us going out. It was really hard for me to go out. Now, my motives are different if I'm in places where alcohol is, right? My motives are, I'm either there for charity work, or I'm either there to listen to music. It's not to drink. Definitely not to drink. I have no desire for that. But I remember going out. I remember coming home. And I remember getting on my knees on the side of the bed. I can't get on my knees too much anymore because they hurt all the time. But it was one of the things I would do is I would kneel and pray. And I remember this person like hopping in the bed. I'm like, you're not gonna pray? 'Cause I would see them pray, and they're like, I'm drinking. Like I don't want to pray if I'm drunk. And something hit me. I'm like, that's why I can't drink. Like, cause I gotta always be in contact with Him. Like, there's not 1 second of my life that I can't be. Like, I have to have that open line to Him at all times, right? So now I have this beautiful fear, I like to call it, and it's a healthy fear, I believe, where I'm afraid to be not in control of my own thoughts and actions and feelings, right? Today, I sat with an orthopedic surgeon. A couple years ago, I had a bone marrow biopsy, and I did it with no drugs. Talk about hurt. So today I had to have a talk with a surgeon who was going to be cutting into my shoulder, and we had to have that talk. I'm like, I can't take, I don't want any narcotics, anything mood altering, and we had to set up a plan for me, where it's going to be anesthesiology and then nerve blocker for like 3 days, and then I'm on my own because not only am I a drug addict and alcoholic, but I'm also 2% of the population that's allergic to ibuprofen. So you have these limitations now because we abused things in the past. But yeah, I will say this. We talked about my kids. We touched on my acting. My partners in here. Without my sobriety, we talked about my job. Without my sobriety, I wouldn't have any of it, including my relationship with God.
Hick, it's an incredible story, and like I said, following you've been outspoken about it. Undoubtedly, you've touched somebody. When we look at this Bayou region, like you said, we grew up in a place, and we understand what the culture is down here, and I mean, we know that unfortunately, kids in junior high school, they're starting to experiment with drugs and alcohol at a very early age. Has anyone reached out to you? Has anyone heard your story or seen your results and seen your life and the turnaround you've made and reached out to you to say that they've been inspired by it? And how has that impacted you?
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you how many since 2014. And I won't get into detail because these are and some have been very successful in their sobriety and some weren't ready. And I know when they're not ready and I know when they are. And there's nothing I could do. There's been some heavy stuff laid on me. to where I've had to take steps back of okay, I need to set some healthy boundaries with people. People call me, I have to tell them, don't call me when you're drunk. Call me before you drink. If you call me, there's been people who has been working on their sobriety and knew to call me before they drank, and then they drank and they went to call me at 1 o'clock in the morning drunk, and then I showed up at their house at 5 o'clock in the morning and made them drink some coffee, and we started working some program, right? And it was early on in my sobriety when I was doing a much more service work, when I had the time to do the service work that I was doing. But I've had many over the years. I've had some heavy things, man, where people's lives have been in the balance, right? It's this one kid from the bayou. I remember I was filming Antebellum, and a parent reached out, and we're all set to talk. And I was like, I can't talk to him today. I'm on set. And I was like, but tomorrow this time. And the little guy texted me, we're going to talk tomorrow this time. And the young man killed himself the day before I got to talk to him. So that was some guilt I carried for a while. So I had to start kind of setting healthy boundaries of I'm not Superman. I can't save the world. I had a hard enough time saving myself, but I can share my strength, hope, and courage, right, with whoever. So through the years, yes, I've been blessed with many success stories of people that have grasped maybe something I said or watched my walk, as we talked about earlier. But in that, I've seen a lot of tragedy, and there's been a lot of heavy things, and I've been grateful for every encounter, because each encounter helps me stay out of self and just be able to give, if it's just a spark of wisdom or something that somebody needed to hear. Y'all see me post on Facebook. I started that early on in sobriety. The beard and that came early on in sobriety. The beard came because they said that I needed to get a plant or a pet. At the time of the relationship I was in, she wasn't letting me get a pet. I didn't want to go back to plants because I used to be good at growing marijuana, and I was like, I don't know, that might be a trigger. I might start getting into plant growing, and it's not something I want to do. It's something I did years ago when I was in the mountains. And I was like, I'm going to grow my beard, man. So I started growing my beard. And it's been a spiritual thing for me. It's my agent knows it's going to take a lot of money for me to cut this beard. Like, everyone's very aware that's what it's going to take. So the beard, and then to stay out of self every day. One morning I woke up in early sobriety, and I'm like, you know what? I was like, I'm going to share whatever wisdom I can on Facebook, because, it can be used for good, right? Y'all see that with what y'all doing. And I've been doing it since 2014. Rarely I miss a day. If I do, it's because I have auditions or I have something going on, but rarely. So those are the two things that I've done. But I've reached a lot of people like that, just like that, are going to share my testimony or my story. And it's a beautiful thing when you can make, and y'all know what y'all doing, when you can make a difference, big or small, right? Just to know that a difference is made.
Most people, when they get into acting, kind of switching gears here, we hear a lot of stories about career actors, and they typically start when they're in their youth, and whether it's just commercials or they have different career paths, but typically you hear about somebody starting acting at a young age. So in your 40s, was it, when you got involved? How did you make that decision?
So I think back, and I remember. Do you remember Buster Caballero? Do you remember Sebastian Caballero that I went to school with? Their father was Gary Caballero.
Oh yeah.
So Buster, which I think Buster's real name is Gary also, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he moved to Texas and he started this podcast, right? And it was in my sobriety, a couple years sober, and it was called the Good Old Boy Podcast. And he had just some everyday men on it that would tell stories of their successes with work or maybe what their business was. And he reached out to me and he wanted to do one on sobriety. And I want to say it was, we were having a conversation and I was asked by him if there was any childhood dream I had that I never got to accomplish because of maybe drugs and alcohol, like my poor decision making in, my early adult life. And I always wanted to be an actor. As a kid, I had so much going on in my home life. Coming from a broken home, like I used to escape into these movies and TV, and I was just, enamored by television and movies. And he just replied, he says, well, why don't you? I'm like, man, I beat addiction. Like, that's a pretty freaking hard thing to do. Like, well, I remember, like, telling people this. Like, I remember telling Cody, who I just left his house. I love my brother. I remember telling Cody and telling Fallon, like, they're like, is he getting high again? Like, is he drinking again? Like, because it's crazy, right? I mean, who in their right mind would go and put themselves out there? And look, at that time, like, I was still learning how to communicate in, like, face-to-face with people. Because for so many years, I had self-medicated to be sociable, right? So I remember, and it's how God works, man. Is that idea grew in my head, and then I started to feel it in my heart. And I never prayed about it. I never asked God for it, I may have asked for guidance. But a couple weeks later, this girl who did special effects makeup reached out to me. She was cutting my hair at the time. She's a Bayou girl, Shani St. Pierre. And she did a lot of work in the movies for makeup and stuff. And she says, there's this director, and he's filming this, like, B-horror movie in Houma. And it was this, like, small thing. But she was like, we need a homeless person. Boom. Like, thank you, sobriety and the beer, right? And we know I could play a drunk homeless person, right? I was like, hey, I think it's method acting, right? So I went out there, and while I was there, the director was like, man, you take, and he was independent director, but he was like, yeah, you take direction really well. And the guy who was a cinematographer was like, man, you really look good on film. And which at first I'm like, why is this dude telling me this? It's kind of weird, But he's like, oh, get some pictures of you. I'm like, yeah. But he did, and he's like, look, man, you need to go and submit to this. And there's actually a couple from the Bayou that actually, and this is how it started out. I think there's a young girl named Brooke Guidry on the Bayou. I think she does it. There's Lance and Selmy. I think he spoke about it. Lance does it. So I went to the site, and I remember I was driving home from work on Halloween Day in 2018. And what it was background work. And I get this call, and she's like, yeah, so-and-so from so-and-so casting. I'm looking for Hick Cheramie. And I'm like, automatically, I'm like, man, only the government and the cops call me Hick. Like, I was like, man, someone's coming to creep up on me, like it's a trick or what. She's like, no. I was like, oh yeah, this is him. Like, hesitantly, like, she's like, we want to book you for an episode of NCIS. So I went and I did it, and I was like, I remember loving it, and I got a little airtime, and I was driving back, and I'm like, that's it. I don't know, 15 minutes of fame. That's gonna happen again, right? And then I got a call the next week, and then it turned into like extra background work, into like featured background work because of my look, and then it turned into me standing in for A-list actors, and that's how it grew. And I started standing in for A-list actors, and I remember I was on set of Antebellum, and I was doing a featured recurring on that film, and I was approached, and they were like, so what you gonna do next? And I remember thinking, I'm like, I think we're going to lunch next. And they're like, no, what's your career like? What you going to do next? And I was like, I don't know. It's like, you need to study acting. Like, you really need to study acting. So from then on, I made the decision to start studying. And I started studying at beginning of 2019, I studied under Jim Gleason. I befriended Jeremy London, started studying under Jeremy London. I started studying under Tracy Kilpatrick. I studied under Matthew Morgan. I studied under... Well, they're going to kill me. I feel like I got to pull up my resume. I studied under some really, really talented and brilliant actors. And quick story about the beard, one of them said, if you're ever going to take this seriously, you need to shave your beard. Like, you'll never get booked, and you'll never get an agent, you'll never get... And I'm like, oh, Billy Slaughter. Oh, Billy's going to kill me. Who was my mentor. If y'all don't know who Billy Slaughter is, look him up. Billy Slaughter is one of the most brilliant actors that I've ever encountered and had the pleasure of working with. Him and I were both blessed to be on Mayfair Witches and have some really cool star roles on that show. But I remember being told, like, if you don't shave, you're not going to... And I just couldn't do it, man. I was like, I'm just so attached to this thing, right? And needless to say, I have one of the best agents in the Southeast region. I've been a co-star on multiple major television series. I just finished a TV pilot. And one of the AMC television series, I just so happened to be side by side with that acting coach, booked on the same day as him. And there I was. So what I learned is be you in that as an actor. Don't change who you are for anyone. They will love you if you are true and genuine as an actor. So I studied, and we took off to Nashville. I lucked out. I worked with this really brilliant actor named Britton Webb on Emancipation, the Will Smith movie. He just so happened to have a good connection with this amazing headshot photographer named Barb Jones. And we hopped in the vehicle. She had like an 8-month waiting list, and I was lucky enough to be put ahead of that list. And we drove to Nashville, and I got to be shot by like one of the top head photographers in the nation. Came back, and then started to shop for an agent, and that's when it got really scary, shopping for an agent. I had to build this whole packet, submission, demo reel, all my credits, my IMDb credits, everything, and I had to be building this packet, and I started kind of shooting to different agencies. And for 3 weeks, I didn't hear nothing. And I'm like... You really start to question yourself as an actor, right? But there was this one agency where, Action Talent Agency, who I'm with now, who I was afraid to submit to because she's like top notch. Her roster is absolutely amazing. She has like Lance Nichols and these top like actors. And she's the only one I didn't submit to. So for 3 weeks, I didn't hear anything. And in the third week, I was at Dan Awesome one day, sweating my butt off, working, and I'm like... I'm sending it to her. I'm like, screw it. So I send it to her. Her name's Angie Moncrief. I got an email back within the day, and she wanted to talk. And by that Friday, we talked an hour, and I was on her agency. And then the following week, all these other agencies started to finally call me, get in touch with me back, and it was too late. But that's how I got into it. I fell in love with it. And I also met a lot of people in the film community who are in sobriety. My support system in sobriety in the film community is huge. I guess it takes a lot of broken people who get fixed that can, pretend to be broken again. I know sobriety has helped me out because I feel like that once you treat and heal from trauma, like it's always part of you. And I'm able to like use it when need be and then put it back where it goes. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned that only the government and cops call you Hick, so I'm going to continue to call you Hick since I fit in one of those categories. But I don't know that we've even mentioned that your friends call you Skip. Yeah. So if you hear Skip Cheramie or you hear that come up, that's where that comes from. But you alluded to Emancipation. I can tell you I've been a long time Netflix and Disney Plus subscriber, but I've never had Apple TV. We just got it to watch 5 Days at Memorial, and Emancipation is next on that list. But you mentioned the beard. Okay, so we got to talk. It's a podcast, so people can't hear it. But if you know Hick Cheramie, you know the beard. So you've given us enough backstory about the beard, but I wanted to touch on something that I found out when kind of researching for our interview today. You're part of this interesting group called the Bearded Villains. Tell us about that.
I am, and I'm no longer. I had to step away from my duties for the Louisiana chapter because my acting career is going to where I didn't think it would ever go. But so when 3 years into my sobriety, I found this club called the Bearded Villains, and it's one of the biggest it is the biggest beer club in the world, and it's there's over, I think we're at 7,000, 8,000 something members now. They're broken up into chapters, and there's chapters just about in every country. There's even a chapter in Iran, and it's bearded men, like-minded bearded men, with no discrimination against sexuality, color, or race, that is mostly involved in charity work. So I looked at that as a good thing for me to be out of self and early sobriety, and I built a huge following and friendships around the world with Bearded Villains, and it had all started back in 2014, the actual club, which I was in Los Angeles with and it took me to a lot of cool places. You know, I've done charity work in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I've flew out to San Juan to charity work, Miami, Houston, San Antonio, Los Angeles. I've been lucky enough to go because there's these big meets and we do these beard competitions, and proceeds go to whatever the choice of the city, you know, we choose or whatever. We did a really cool one in Houston where we got to fill the street with snow and had these like chronically ill children like snowball fight.
That's
and
awesome.
Yeah, it was super, super rewarding and awesome to see. Really humble to be a part of that one. But I was lucky enough to be the captain for the Louisiana Bearded Villains. I was lucky enough to hold, I think I'm the only one that held every role in the chapter, from captain, co-captain, scout, lieutenant, and I've held every role. And it was tough, a board member, but it was tough because I had to make the decision a little over 2 years ago where I'll always be a bearded villain. I had to step out of the Louisiana chapter because I could have stayed because the captain and I are really tight. His name's Margaret Tremonti. He's an amazing human being, and him and I has been through so much together, and we helped build this chapter, and now what they're doing with it is just amazing, you know. But I didn't think it was fair. I thought there was a lot of new blood coming in that can actually bring new ideas and spend more time on the things that they wanted to do because the acting was taking, you know. So I felt like I did my years and I did what I had to do, and I'm still a bearded villain. I'm just not, he'll say I'm part of the Louisiana chapter, but I'm not actually part of the Louisiana chapter because I'm not an active member in it. But it was a great experience, and I met a lot of amazing people from around the world. You know, I have great friends in Morocco, Australia, France, Italy, you know, the UK, Canada, everywhere. I mean, these guys are everywhere, and there's such an amazing group of men.
I want to kind of bring it home with this last question, and we kind of alluded to it in the intro, talking about the Super Bowl commercial, which is a lot of people may, if they didn't know you before then, a lot of people in the Bayou may have found out about you at least by then. And we were kind of joking beforehand. You know, you've done some TV and movie and film acting, but you have also done some local commercials. This was a different type of commercial. This was the main event. This was the Super Bowl. When you think of ads, you think of the Super Bowl as the Super Bowl of commercials. You had the opportunity. You were featured in the He Gets Us campaign, which for those of you who are unfamiliar, and I can let you help fill in, but essentially it's a modern campaign trying to introduce a new generation of to Christianity. Can you talk about and this ad campaign? It was several ads throughout the Super Bowl. You were featured in one of them, and it was regarded as one of the most impactful ads of the Super Bowl this year. Talk about how you got involved, and how, you've talked about your spirituality here today. Talk about what it was like being able to work on such a campaign, not just any commercial.
Yeah, so, the way this whole commercial came about, I was number one, I was unaware of S3E4 Gets Us in the beginning. And we did not know it was a Super Bowl commercial. And I'll tell you how that kind of played out if we have time. It's just a quick story. So I get, as an actor, I get something called a breakdown from an agent, and I get this email from an agent, and it's to audition for this really big casting director. His name is Brent Caballero. He's actually from Louisiana, but he runs Caballero Casting. And since COVID, we don't get to do a lot of live auditions. A lot of stuff is done from the house, and we send in tapes, and that's how our auditions are done. This was a live audition. So the audition was, there are 3 points to it. One, you would argue about something political. Two, you would argue about mask or no mask as in association with COVID. And then three, you would spend 20 seconds into a camera spiking the lens, because as actors we don't spike the lens, but they wanted you to look deep into the lens and they wanted you just to rant about something. So I was like, cool. Like, freaking live audition. Live auditions are different, man. When I get in a live audition, I'm standing in front of a table with people surrounded at this table just like this, and I'm performing, right? There's just something different about it. It's intimate. You feel alive. You feel adrenaline. You feel it all happening. So I drive to Second Line Studios in Uptown New Orleans. I get there, and there's this room, this gigantic waiting room full of, it must be 100 people in there. And there's a long hallway and these two doors, and you could just hear yelling, loud yelling. So I'm sitting in the waiting room, and someone comes out and is like, all right, Hick Cheramie, you will be performing with, and they show me introduce me to this woman. There's another actress, and I'm like, and you can ask Cameron. Cameron's been with me on set. I'm very, very, very respectful as an actor to other actors. Can I touch you here? Are you okay with me doing this? Is this too much? Would you be comfortable with this? I always ask these questions because, with Hollywood, it has happened, so I'm very careful. So I wanted to talk to the woman. I said, look, do you want to set any healthy boundaries? Is there anything I can or cannot touch on? And, oh, no, I got representation in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, and I do improv, and I've been on, this and the Comedy Store, and I can do anything. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, because I'm going to go off on you, right? And no, I'm good. I said, what you want to talk about? She's like, how about we talk about, she's like, you got private insurance? I said, well, I got Blue Cross. I said, I have insurance from my work. She's like, oh, I don't have it. She's like, I have government insurance. She's like, let's argue about that. And I'm like, all right. If anybody knows me, I'm a pretty neutral guy. I'm a pretty nice, calm. And I always get played a villain or a bad guy, and people are like, I understand that. You're so nice. Like, you're so nice. But no, that's the time I get to be mean. So I remember us going off head to head, and she had her turn. And I just had to stay there and take it. And then I went on her. And when I went on her, when I finished in those 20 seconds, she was in tears. The casting director got up from the table, went, and he hugged her. Are you okay? I'm like, I freaking blew this. Like, I blew this audition. And the other part was for me to go into the camera, and you had to just improv. So I'm driving up here, one freaking LA and one from Thibodeau, and there's a sugarcane truck in front of me. Pick! Rock on my windshield. Didn't break it, but rock on my windshield. And then I remember listening to a podcast. I'm like, Brent Caballero's family owns cane trucks and New Roads. I was like, I'm going to use that. So I go in the camera. I'm like, it's my first live audition in 2 years, and this bleeping rock hits my windshield. Now it's broke. So when I finished, and I was raging, right? He's like, he cut the tape. He's like, man, that really happened to you? I'm like, no. I was like, but I know your family owns cane trucks. And he's like, yeah, those drivers could do it. And he kind of smiled, and I was like, oh, maybe I saved myself here. So I remember walking out and calling her. I'm like, I was like, God, it felt good to audition. And I was like, it felt good, because, I do auditions, and you get them, you don't, like, it's constant. So I remember driving home, and then I get an email. Hey, you got it. Like, confirm. When you get this confirm, it happened with me in a TV series not too long ago. 4 a.m, I got up to make pee. I see the phone light up. I thought it was something wrong with my kids. I look at the phone, and it was a freaking TV pilot that I didn't want to do it first. I tried out for a role, didn't want to do it. Tried for another role, 2 takes, and I'm like, I'm done. I said, we're sending it in. I'm done with this. It was Game of Thrones type stuff, and it's a TV pilot, and it's gonna. So I look at the phone, and I was like, oh my God. She's like, something's wrong with the kid. She wakes up no, the kids are fine. I said, I booked the pilot. And she's like, oh my God, you booked the pilot. So you get these emails, and so I call, man, I booked this campaign or whatever, this commercial. So I go to, when I get the information for the fitting, I see He Gets Us. Like, no freaking way. No way. Like, how, I love the commercials. I love the simplicity of Jesus Christ. Because I think that people make it too complicated. Hey, real easy. Teach her love and compassion, right?
That's it.
To the best of our ability, right? Be better than you were the day before. Teacher of love and compassion. And that's what I love about their commercials. They simplify what people make really difficult, right? Mm-hmm. So I was excited about that. So I go for the fitting, and then we did it for the fitting, and there was this woman who I worked with before in the industry who was doing one of the women doing the fitting, and she kind of leans over and she's like, you know this is a Super Bowl commercial? I'm like, no. She's like, yeah, it's a Super Bowl commercial. This is big. I'm like, no. She was in the car waiting for me, but I couldn't wait to go back to the car to tell her. And I remember this other really talented actor, his name was Earl White from Boston. He was there, and him and I were friends, and I went, and I was like, Earl, this is a Super Bowl commercial. No. So I was able to meet the young man that you see me arguing with. I was able to meet him that day at a fitting. We started to build a relationship a week or 2 prior to filming. Discussed a lot about ourselves and our backgrounds and what we were going to be comfortable with. And so we get on set to do it. And the director's like, we had a real heated day yesterday, and it got really emotional. And he's like, so what y'all got planned? I'm like, oh, I'm telling him this and this. No, I don't think that. I said, no. I was like, we've been knowing each other for about 2 weeks. Like, we know exactly. And this kid that's with me in that picture, his first audition ever, he showed up to be an extra. And they chose him to be a principal with me.
Wow.
So that just made me happy. He was so nervous in front of cameras. His name's Stephen Gunn, great guy. And I remember, like, in between us yelling at each other, like you could tell he was nervous, and I'd stop and I'd go, and I'd, like, in his face, and I had the whole crew laughing. And the guy who takes these pictures, if you ever go to my Instagram, follow him, his name's Brett Curry. He's a freaking amazing photographer. He's the one that does all the stills for He Gets Us. And so, like, he was there, he was laughing, and yeah, you know, we didn't know how big it would be. We didn't know the impact. I was out of town filming a TV pilot called Raymore in March. And Cameron messaged me while I was on set. And she's like, my friend just sent me this from Las Vegas. And it was like just me on this big billboard. And they used me on the thumbnail for the YouTube video. You know, so I'm like...
Yeah, I was going to say...
That's wild, you know?
It wasn't just that you got to be in the commercial. It wasn't just that the commercial series was the talk the next day. It was that picture in particular.
Yeah, it was
your
like,
photo.
Yeah, I started... And I remember the next day just like... And, you know, this is where it kind of like... It gets a little crazy because I'm like going and I'm Googling like He Gets Us, and my picture's popping up. And it's popping up on negative news and positive news, and it's just like this hateful white guy with his finger in the face of this other man who's just like taunting him, and I'm like, oh, but I'm just an actor, you know. So I gotta remember that I'm just an actor, and people need to remember that I'm just an actor, especially people who reach out to me and think that I got $500,000 from Morris Bart. That happens. People think that the first time I seen that commercial, I was in the cardiologist in Thibodeau, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and it comes on. And then it's the first time I seen it. I'm like, oh, that's the commercial right there. I'm looking. People gonna start looking at me. And I text them. I was like, I'm gonna get robbed. Someone's gonna rob me. But you know, out of everything I've done, everybody knows me from the Morris Bart commercial, bro. I'm walking into a racetrack. I filmed a really cool commercial last week for this big insurance company. Y'all gonna see it. The whole campaign's called "What You Doing." You know how different companies have this is their new campaign, "What You Doing," and I'm like the main dude in it, and I'm really excited about it, and the clients love me, and it was a really good shoot. But I'm heading over there was it fitting? Went for the fitting. Yeah, so I get out my car at racetrack on 90, and there's these 3 dudes walking from a truck, and this dude's like staring at me. And you know when somebody's staring at you, you can feel somebody staring at you, you can feel him staring at me. And I'm walking for the door, and he kind of like speeds up. I'm like, what's going on? And he grabs the door, he's like, "You're the guy from that Morris Bart commercial." And I was like, not the Super Bowl commercial, no. Not Mayfair Witches, Emancipation, Your Honor with Brian Cranston, from the Morris Bart commercial, which, by the way, one of the best paying commercials that I've ever did. I don't know, this insurance one was good, but they keep renewing it, and every time they renew it, I get paid. But he said, I was like, "Yes, sir, I am." I was like, "It's a pleasure to meet you." I shake his hand, and as I'm doing this guy's walking out of racetrack, and he's like, "You are the guy from the Morris Bart." I know it, another one. I was like, "Oh, Lord." So yeah, I did the Morris Bart commercial, and it's apparently it's with if I had a dial up every time somebody sent it to me in my inbox on Messenger. "Hey bro, I was watching TV. I was watching American Idol, and I saw you in the morning. I was watching the Saints game, and I was eating lunch, and I watched." So I get all kind of screenshots, and I don't know. I guess the commercial's paced at a certain time limit. Every picture that everybody takes, it looks like I'm constipated. I'm squinting like this on the bike. And I'm like, "Oh, can anybody get?" But I didn't. So I watched the commercial. I was like, "I guess it's the face I make the whole time."
Well, no matter how many hits y'all got on that Super Bowl commercial, the Morris Bart one definitely made you famous.
It did. I think it did.
All right, sir. We are now time for the moment of truth. It's the rapid fire questions. We want you to say the first thing that comes to your mind, but feel free to explain if you need to. Are you ready? If you could have one final meal cooked by your parents or grandparents, what would it be?
Oh, my routine is meatballs and gravy. Her routine meatballs. That's something that I haven't seen since the early 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds good. In the past, we've asked about gumbo and potato salad, whether you have it in the side or on top or whatever. So our question this season is white beans. Go on top of the jambalaya or on the side?
And they can't touch.
They can't touch at all.
No.
Favorite snowball flavor?
That has to be coconut, and it's got to be from Grams.
Coconut. So that's a good one. But coconut. So you were a messy kid. That's what we figured.
Yeah.
All the parents gave their kids the clear snowball flavor.
Yeah, and maybe because I used to get all excited, like if I have a green one or a red. I don't know if they jack me up, and then I want to talk about the color in the toilet, and hey, this one's green, and like maybe if we give him coconut, he's gonna shut up.
That's another good reason to give clear snowballs. Jar roux, sometimes or never?
Never. I've never in my life used jar roux.
Okay, and finally, you're at a down the bayou wedding reception. What song do you expect to hear?
I tell you one I don't like that I always hear is Brown Eyed Girl.
Yeah, that is typically heard at any wedding reception.
I always hear that one. I don't know. I don't get invited to weddings too much. I don't think nobody likes me. The only time I've been to more weddings officiating them when I became ordained than I was ever invited to a wedding. And I'm like, "Yo, guys, I don't drink no more. Like, it's cool. Like, I can go and behave myself."
Well, Hick Cheramie, thank you so much for joining us. If people want to go right now, they've heard the interview, they want to go find you somewhere on a streaming service, where's the best place, or where are some places they can find you right now?
You can find me on Mayfair Witches, which is on AMC Plus. You can find me on Apple TV, an Emancipation, Will Smith movie. You can find me on Hulu, Amazon for Money Plane. I play this really nasty Russian who chops a guy's arm off. And then
I can see that.
You can find me, what's the Obsidians, I think, is on Amazon also. And then what's it, the Voodoo and Tubi or Free. That. But I think that's all I have right now out available. I got a lot of commercial work right now because unfortunately we have the riders are
Right.
on strike right now. I'm not trying to cross no picket lines. So I've been doing a lot of like non-union commercials for insurance companies um, but I think that's it. We waiting to find out. There's a really cool TV pilot I did called Raymar, which is a fantasy, which I'm not really into, but I was so lucky to get this role, and I kind of got into it, like actually playing this role. And I think there's some big networks shopping that one.
How can people connect with you online?
Hick Cheramie _actor on Instagram. You can find me on Google Hick Cheramie, and like all kind of stuff will come up. And then Hick Cheramie on Facebook. I don't do Snapchat. I don't do TikTok. If I wasn't an actor, I probably wouldn't do Instagram because the world we live in, you have to stay relevant. And unfortunately, social media has its positives and negatives, but it plays a big role in my relevancy as far as to what I'm doing and what projects I'm working on and casting directors seeing me and so forth.
Hick, I wanted to end on a positive note. If someone listening is to this podcast is struggling with addiction, what would you like to tell that person?
You're not hopeless and broken. Like, I promise you that there is a way. It takes complete surrender, accountability, and a lot of uncomfortableness. But in the end, it's so worth it. I tear up when I talk about this, man, because I thought I was hopeless and broken, and a lot of people think they are, and none of us are. We all have this really cool gift that God gave us called free will, and we have the freedom of choice, right? And we can either choose to be a victim or we can choose to be free. So get help. Don't be ashamed. Get help. I was there too. It's okay to say you need help.
Hick Cheramie, thank you so much for joining us, man. Really appreciate your time.
Oh, humble and honor. Thanks for having me.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the DTB Podcast. Thanks to our producer, Ross Jambon, our executive producers, Jure Gyro and Hillary Crum, and the other Bless Your Heart board members, Luke Newman and Chris Brantley. Please visit blessyourheartnonprofit.com to donate and learn more about our organization. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the DTB Podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also get more content by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at the DTB Podcast. I'm Brendan Mathern. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk again soon.